To begin on this project, what I'm going to do is create a basic scene. The type of scene that I'm creating is not an actual scene as Flash calls a scene, where we have access to different scenes, because we're in scene 1 and I can actually go under Window Other Panels and I can choose Scene, and I could add multiple scenes. That's useful because it removes your layers, starts you back over at frame 1, so you could have a intro credit scene, then you can have your main project, then you could have a final credit scene. You could have multiple scenes along the way. The problem with doing scenes is controlling the audio. So for the purposes of this project, it doesn't work well because you won't be able to see the audio continuing from scene to scene, which will make animating to the audio particularly challenging. So you're better off doing what we've looked at in the past, which is using folders to help organize your material instead of using scenes. So some questions have come up about using scenes proper. I would discourage you from that on this particular project. Now, with that being said, I'm going to create my kind of lowercase scene, my setting for my project. So I'm going to first start out, and I'm going to use the rectangle, and I do not want a stroke on it, and I'm going to just choose a blue color. This is going to be my sky. I'm going to name that layer. I think it's a good idea to name your layers while you're working so it's easier to keep track of them. Now, this particular rectangle that I have drawn for my sky, if I decide that I don't want it to be a solid color but instead want it to be a gradient, I could go and choose a gradient off of my swatches list over here and click on that, and we can see the closest thing I have is either the radial blue or the black and white linear. So we'll start with radial blue. If I click over to color, I will see that I have options for changing this particular thing, turning off autosave there. I can change this gradient from a radial gradient to a linear gradient. So now we can see it goes side to side. If I want to tweak the color a little bit, I want it to go kind of from a purpler color and not on this cyan color, but I'm going to have it go more. It's going for more of the sunset color today, so we'll get that nice reddish orange occurring down here. Now, in some programs, after I create a gradient, I can choose the angle for the gradient directly in my gradient mixer window. Not so in Flash. I wish it was there, but it isn't. So I've now created this nice gradient, come from purple to orange, and it will make a nice sky as part of this project. Now when I click on this, if I want to modify it so it goes up and down instead of side to side, to do so, I need to use the Gradient Transform tool, which is under the Free Transform tool. So remember that any tools that you see the little black triangle in its right corner, that indicates there are more than one tools under that tool. That's how all the Adobe products function these days. So I can choose Gradient Transform tool, and now that gives me the ability to transform this gradient. I can do two things. I can change the rotation of this gradient, and I can then compress it a little bit so that now that gradient covers the distance that I've indicated on screen. So that works pretty well. If I wanted to shrink it up more, I could. If I want to change the center point of that gradient, I could. If I wanted to have it go at an angle, I could. So there's really a lot of options available to you as you work with these tools. So now I've created my sky. I'm going to lock that layer because I'm done with it for now. I'm going to switch over and create my background layer. So on this particular layer, I will grab my rectangle tool, and I am going to find a nice dark green color for grass, and I am going to zoom out a little bit because I want this to be big. And the reason for that is I want to be able to take this ground that I have drawn and I'm going to animate it across the stage in a little bit. So I need to have it big enough so I can create the illusion of the camera panning across the stage. And I don't move my camera, I move my object instead. So I'm going to name this layer grass. And now I want to add in one more layer, and this layer will be my bushes. And for this, I will just draw bushes. And I can take those and fill them with different colors. Now you may have noticed that I did not draw bushes across the entire stage because I intend to then use some of these more than one time. So I can select it just using the select tool, marquee around it, and now if I drag it over to here and hold down Option, you will see a little plus appear next to my cursor, indicating that it is going to create a copy of this object. So I can start dragging, hold down Option, I get the plus. Now we have a copy of this object. Now doing something like this is okay, but you have to be aware that it does create parts that are all the same, so eventually your audience may notice that you copied them. It's kind of like bad Photoshop work. If you just recklessly clone things, it becomes fairly obvious to people that the image has been shopped. Alright, so now I have some bushes here. If I want to work with these and animate them on my screen, I could do that right now, but it's going to be better if I have them converted into a symbol. Now I have a whole bunch of bushes and I have some grass, which I might even want to take that grass and, because I can, it just seems so plain right now. Oh, that's the same color I had before. We'll go one step lighter. I can scribble on this. And notice while I'm drawing, it appears that it's drawing on top of what's there, but remember that those bushes are on a whole separate layer. So this artwork that I'm drawing is actually sitting behind the bushes. This just breaks it up a little bit so it's not quite so flat, because it's not as interesting to look at that way. Oh, and be careful you don't right-click unintentionally. So now that I have this, if I want to tween my grass and tween the bushes, it's not really going to work well. I mean, I'd have to tween each one separately. But I could combine them together into a single movie clip symbol, which is what I'm going to do now. So to do that, I'm going to select these two frames. And I do that just by, whoop, don't want to draw there. Switch back to the select tool. And if I just drag in the timeline, it selects those frames. If I right-click on those frames, we will see that there's an option to cut frames, which is what I actually want to do. I want to cut these. I could choose copy and then I can delete these frames later. That works too. But I'm just going to choose cut so I know they're gone and I'm not going to freak out about the whole thing. Oh, okay. That's just pretend freak out. I'm not really freaking out there. I cut them, they're gone. Now I want to make a new symbol. The key thing when you're animating is if you dump everything you want to move or animate into a symbol, then you can animate it. If it's not a symbol, you're going to find it's a huge pain to animate. So I recommend you make a symbol. Insert new symbol. I'm going to call this background. Now we can see scene 1 background. I'm inside that symbol. We can see over in my library, I see that symbol there. So now, at this point, if I right click right here on this keyframe, I will see I have an option to paste frames. So instead of copying the artwork on the stage, I actually copied the frames themselves. And the good part about that is, notice, my layers reappeared and their names are still there. That's really cool when you copy paste frames or cut paste frames, that it maintains that naming scheme for you. I can go back to scene 1. I can take my background, I can drag it out, I can put it on the stage right here. My bushes layer, throw it away, don't need it. My grass layer, I'm just going to call this background. So when you make artwork, sometimes you will know what you're doing and how you're going to layer it and build it ahead of time. So you can start with inside a symbol right away and get going. Other times you will start making things and start building up your layers of artwork, and then you'll realize, oh, I kind of wish these were inside a symbol. And you have 2, 3, 4, 10 layers. Highlight them all, cut those frames, insert new symbol, right click on the first frame, paste frames, there it is. And it doesn't have to be one frame. You can copy tweens and everything. Because a frame is a frame, and you can copy all of it. So that can be a huge time saver at that point. So now I have my sky, now I have my background. And I want to put a little house on the prairie today. Or something. Figure out what it is going to be. Call it building. So if we're drawing this building, so now I have a basic building. Probably should be colored in a little bit so it's easier to see what's happening. You can grab the paint bucket, color it in. Nobody's home, so it'll be black inside the windows. And let's see, we get to have there. So there's my house. Lock my background layer. Highlight the house. F8, convert it to a symbol. Alright, so now it's a symbol. So if we look at this, we can see I have a background, I have grass, I have a house. If I want to animate these different things, I need to add tweens to them to make that happen. The hitch that I'm running into right now is that I don't know where the actual edges of my stage are unless I turn these layers off because I overdrew my artwork. Intentionally so. So now I'm going to introduce a new concept that we haven't looked at before, which is called guides. I could pull up my rulers, could go view, just going to zoom in a little bit because it's too small otherwise. Go under view, and then I could choose rulers, and then I can drag out from here and try and line it up to 0. I'm trying. I think it's on. It's pretty close maybe. So I could put these guides out here, and I can kind of, you know, they work, I guess. Oh, that's right. That doesn't... guides aren't undoable. But I'm going to clear them because I don't care for them. I don't want to see my rulers anymore. But to put in the guides, there's something else I can do. So I'm going to give myself a new layer. I'm going to call this layer Guides. Then I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to choose a stroke color that's somehow different than what's there. And normally I use red as my color, but with the colors going on, I think white might actually work better. So we'll see. Draw a box. Now if you were paying attention, you would notice that I did not draw this box with any care about where it sat on screen, because if I select it, I can set its properties, and this is a relic of my Illustrator days of spending all my time in Illustrator. I use numerical settings for everything. I rarely just freehand things on the stage, but it's always positioned and aligned and placed based on the numbers in my control palette. That's how I do it. So here I can decide I want this to be at 0, 0, and the width, I know that this project that I'm working on is the default size of 550, and it has a height of 400. So when I do that, I will realize that this particular box that I've put here is that big. And white seems to be a good color based on the darker, rich tone artwork that I'm working with. Now, for this layer here, I'm going to switch its color temporarily so we can see something. Actually, I'll leave it for now. If I test my movie, we'll see a lot of white border showing up on these edges here, so I don't really like that. But I told you this was going to be a guide, and I can convert it to a guide by double-clicking on its icon, the layer icon that is, and then I can choose Guide off of the list, and that turns it to a guide layer. And then it looks like this, where it puts a little T-square instead of the page icon onto it, indicating this is now a guide layer. Guide layers are really helpful, not only for giving you that kind of working area of your stage, and I'd argue this is better than trying to draw out guides, but you can also write notes to yourself. So I could say, you know, get milk on the way home. So I could do that. Now, when I publish my movie, it's going to look like this. But right here, I have a nice note for myself. So it's common when you're animating, you write notes on a guide layer in the periphery of, don't forget to color his foot. Don't forget to draw this. Don't forget to move this. You make these notes because when you're in the midst of working on it, it's very common to miss things or forget things. So now if I test this movie, we'll see that because that artwork is on a guide, it does not show up. Oh, let's undo that. Lock my proper layers. Delete, don't need that, and okay. So I'm now back to proper tone. Another thing that is common on a guide layer is that many times people will add in their swatches. So I may add in, okay, I need some green. And I need this green. And you put these swatches on the guide layer. So then when you are coloring your character or artwork, all you have to do is just click over to the eyedropper, click on the swatch, then hit B for brush and go back to working with it, or K if you're trying to fill a section with it. And it allows you to work very quickly without having to go find that color somewhere on screen, because it could be that color is in the previous frame because you're doing a frame-by-frame animation for a character. But if you have a guide layer with all of your swatches, you can very quickly just pick and choose the colors as you need them. But it's a guide layer, so when it publishes, you won't see it. To make my animation start to move, what I am going to do is I am going to unlock my building, I'm going to unlock the background, and I am going to select Create Motion Tween. Now we'll notice that the sky disappeared and my guide disappeared, because if we look in the timeline, we will see that they do not have frames. Only my building and background have frames, which I can bring those back. I'm just going to animate these first. So I added the tween. Now I can pull this across, like that. And we'll see that I've now created an animation. And that's it. It moved. Now, if I play my movie, we'll see that it's going really, really fast. It defaults when you add a tween to 1 second. It's not a very long time to have an animation go. It's fairly short. So we need to change that a little bit and adjust the timing. If I feel like something's missing because my sky is missing, of course I can pull that back by hitting F5 on the keyboard. So I clicked in that layer, added F5. We'll have to do it again because I'm going to stretch this animation out at least 3D times longer or so. So to add out for that other layer, now those tween layers, if I put my cursor by it, you'll see it gives me the double arrow, which allows me to make it longer or shorter. The sky, if I want to extend that, I can just click out in the timeline and hit F5 to add frames. F6 adds a keyframe. If we just want something to exist, all it needs is frames. And now we've created the illusion of our animation moving. That moves a little bit slower. And it looks like the house is just disappearing once it gets on screen, because at this point our movie goes back to frame 1. If I want the house to stay there for a little while, I need to give my tween layers frames. So if I want it to stay for, I don't know, a second or so, I just clicked out here. Actually, I could do that to all 3 of these layers even. And the same way I added to my sky, I can add time or frames to these layers by hitting F5. So now they just exist. Moves and just exists. Test my movie. It works. To create the fade from black, which is a time-honored cinematic technique, if you don't do a cut, a simple fade is typically one of the most common transitions that you're going to use. So to accomplish that, I'm going to create a rectangle, because I'm planning to fade from black, I will just make it black to begin with. And now this particular rectangle, I don't want the stroke that appeared on it, so I can hit delete. So I have a rectangle. It doesn't matter too much what size or X and Y I use, because I can modify it after I turn it to a movie clip, but I'm going to adjust it in the beginning because that will make some things a little bit easier. So I will say X of 0, Y of 0, width of 550, Y of 400. I mean height of 400. So standard size, fills my stage. There it is. Now this particular thing I want to convert to a symbol. Fade box. Now it's a symbol. Because it's a symbol, I can then tween it. Now currently it goes the span of my whole movie. I don't want it to go that long. Let's just try a fade over the course of 1 second. Here it is. It's all black and then it goes away, so that's not really a fade. It's not fading yet. Boom. It's more of a cut, not really a fade. That's cut from black. But I want to fade from black. Because it is a movie clip, I can adjust its color effect. Its transparency is its alpha. And I can now fade it down. So, ooh, look at that. Now, if you're paying attention, you will notice that there is a very faint edge showing on this box. And if I look at it, I will notice that its alpha, I did not fade it to 0, but I faded it down to 9. What I've found over the years is that when I fade things in or fade things out, start or end at about 10%. I was trying to hit 10 here, but I missed and got 9. Now, the reason for that is if I fade it to 0 and click off, let's try again, 0, I can't see that the box is there. If I'm at 0, I can't see a difference between those two frames, so I don't know if the box is even there. But if I fade it down to 10%, or around there, you can see that that's a very little difference. And the step between that over the course of 1 frame is generally going to be a smooth visual transition. 10 to 0 is smooth. So now I have a fade. So there's a fade. The box fades in. Now let's just say I wanted to put a title on. Remember, as you're building your project, you are certainly welcome, even encouraged, to add in a little title sequence. So if you figure your music is 2 minutes long, you can start your title during the beginning part. You could easily eat up 10, 20, 30 seconds worth of song just showing us the title. Putting in credits for yourself, animated by, put your name up on screen. You could easily blow through 30 seconds worth of fun. And suddenly you have less to animate. And animating just a simple title is typically not a huge endeavor. It's not like trying to animate a whole character with every limb, every arm, leg, hand, foot, toe individually articulated. So if I want to animate a title, I'll name that layer. I'm going to add in a new layer. This layer will be my title. I'm going to grab my text tool. I'm going to find a new font because there were some complaints over the font I used this morning. So I will choose something different. Now the color black probably won't work since I'm putting the text over black, so I'm going to choose white as a default here. I'm going to take my text and center it, because then if I just click on screen here, as I type it will be centered. And this will be my amazing, no, I have a different idea. This will be the crazy bird. Now, why is the bird crazy, you may be thinking to yourself, and that's something you're just going to have to show a little patience and wait for. Now, if I want this to be perfectly centered on screen, right over here is my align palette, and I can then say align it to the stage by clicking that box. And I can hit align, and now it's centered on screen. I know that my fade there is correct size. Now, I'm going to have my text fade up, hang out for a bit, and then fade out. And then I want my background to fade out. So to do that, I'm going to first convert it to a symbol. So I select my text, F8 to convert to symbol, title. Now it's been converted to a symbol. Create motion tween. I know I don't need my tween that long, so I will just bring my cursor over and shorten it. Okay. So at this point, I want my bird to fade out, be faded. It's going to fade up over about half a second. So now that I've gone to that point, I can just pull it up. It automatically puts in that keyframe. I'm going to leave it up. This is a short title, so leaving it up for about a second is probably going to be adequate. So at this point, I'm going to click and hit F6, which puts in that keyframe. Click after this to stretch it out. Click on the bird, pull it back down to 10%. So I had to insert this keyframe here so Flash knew I wanted it to stay at 100% before it faded out. So now I have the crazy bird. Actually, that's kind of liking how it fades over the black. And then the black fades out while that's happening. But that's not what I really want to have happen. Is I want the black to fade after the bird fades. Like this. So to accomplish that, I need my black to be longer. And when it comes to moving all your stuff around, there isn't one, oh, do it this way or do it that way, because as you can see, I'm changing things that I've made after I've already made them. The best course of action would, of course, be you know exactly how you want everything, where you want everything at the very, very beginning. It never works that way. So you make something and then you have to modify it. That's normal. That's part of the workflow. Now, if I stretch this out, that changes my tween. To adjust my fade, if I look at this keyframe right here, that keyframe, I'm going to lock my title so I can click on it. That keyframe has an alpha of 100. The black is 100% black. I want it to stay 100% black until right here at frame 52. And at 52, I want it to start going to 10% black or 10% opacity. So a couple ways I could do that. Again, there's always more than one way. Is I could click right here and hit F6. That inserted a keyframe. Now, if I click on my artwork, that keyframe, I can bump it up to 100. So it stays at 100, and then it fades. That's one way I could do that. The other way is that if I click and select just this frame, and if you notice it took me 3 tries to get just that frame selected, because it sometimes will choose the whole tween. But if I want to choose just this frame, like that. The same way that I copied bushes, I can actually copy a frame. So if I start dragging that frame, try again. If I hold down Option and then start dragging that frame, you can see the little plus right there. And now, we'll see that it stays black, and then it starts fading. So it fades faster now. You can see fades in, fades out, and then I have my house pan over. Now if I want that house pan to start later, so if I want it to start later, I can modify that house pan and the building, so I can move the background and the building over. Oh. There's really no reason they have to even be on screen until it starts fading. And now, so we get the full animation, which now I think it might be going too fast when it comes in. It's going pretty fast, but it'll work for now. To stop this tween from showing up any longer, if I hit F7, it inserts an empty frame. Now, if I click right here and paste frames, it pastes that chunk that I copied. We can see I was close on my guess of where, but a little bit off. But now if we notice it starts black and it fades up. So that's a little bit problematic. But the nice part is Flash gives me an option here that's really useful. If I right click in that, scroll to the bottom, I have an option to reverse my keyframes. It's probably also under modify, I don't know, somewhere. Edit, timeline, no, I don't know. I guess I can only get to it by right clicking. I could probably set a keyboard shortcut for it now that I know how to customize those too. Reverse keyframes, and now we'll see that it started light and fades out. Now the nice part about having it start black, fade out, and go back to black, it actually creates a nice smooth continuous loop. If everything's happening too fast and I need to modify it, want to change things at that point, that's when I need to worry about how many frames I'm giving my animation. If your whole project plays too fast, you need more frames. You need to stretch things out to slow them down. Now, the one thing you can't do is you can't just grab everything and stretch it, because when you have these different chunks that are occurring, if I stretch this, that doesn't affect the other stuff that was timed. So you can't just grab the end, stretch out, and say, hey, look, I'm done. It's going to take a little bit more effort to stretch everything out. But it can be done, or you can click in an area, hit F5, that adds frames to it. It's not uncommon to build an animation and realize you just made it a little bit tight and you need to kind of double each frame, where you just click on a frame, F5, click on the next one, hit F5, and it's tedious, but it stretches it out and it gives you the effect that you need to get your end result. To make the bird, I'm going to go and choose Insert New Symbol. I'm going to call this bird. Now, the reason I'm choosing to create a new symbol for the bird is because I want to create the bird separately and independently and build a little animation to go with the bird, and then I'm going to bring that animation into my project and have the bird fly across the screen. And then you will also learn why it's the crazy bird tonight. So if I want to make the bird, I could make a boring kind of basic bird, and then so I have a flapping motion like that. I don't like that, so we're not going to do that. Oh, shoot.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver is...
Wrong key command. I was trying to hit Shift F5. I hit Command F5, which apparently starts VoiceOver. At least it's pleasant when it tells you that it's welcoming you in with a nice, good announcer voice. So I'm going to make a bird. I'm not going to color the bird for right now just because that will take more time than I want to devote to this demonstration tonight. So I have the bird, hit F7 for a new keyframe so that I can see what I'm drawing for this. It's useful to turn on onion skinning down at the bottom. Now, sometimes I find challenging to keep talking while I'm drawing, so I apologize for the silence. But sometimes I run out of things to say while I'm focusing and thinking a little bit about what I'm trying to draw. Now, if I turn off onion skinning, we can see the bird's flapping. Now, in the interest of being lazy, I can select this frame here and drag it over so then that matches this frame here over actually, I think those two almost need to be reversed. Oh well. It'll work. But now my bird's flying really, really fast, almost hummingbird style. So this is one of those occasions where if I hit F5 on each frame, I can stretch it out. Alright, there's my bird flapping his wings. Now one thing I can do, because I didn't draw closed paths which are easy for filling, I can add a second layer here. And on this layer, I'm going to just choose a different color. And this will be my red bird of happiness, apparently. And I'll get a bigger, squishier brush to go fast. We'll see, I've now colored it in. A little sloppy on the head. Now if I just click over here and hit F7, and something like this can actually be used to decent visual effect of it gives a little looser sketch quality to it instead of having everything being a perfectly defined shape perfectly filled in. So if you take advantage of the fact that you are working with layers, you can build something like this up quite nicely. And then it's not a huge deal to color it in. Okay, so I've created my bird. If I look in my timeline, there is no layer yet for the bird, so I will need to add that. So I'm just going to pull my layers up a little bit. And I'll put it above the building layer. Bird. Now if I want the bird to appear on screen, let's see, here's my movie. I can just drag the bird out. There's the bird. He sits right here. If we remember the lesson from last week, ooh, I like that red bird on the sky, it's kind of fun. But the lesson from last week is if I look at this, I can see that the bird had frames, but I don't get to see him flapping his wings. Even if I take the bird and decide to tween him or do anything else, which, I mean, he's a bird, so he really should fly. Just going to shorten it down and move it over so we can see. Look at, there's the bird. For that matter, we'll just animate the bird over here, free of the house for the moment. But the bird's not doing much yet. Go back. Select tool. Fly the bird across. We can see, oh look, he animates. Ooh. But if we remember, we can modify so that he renders as a graphic, not a movie clip, and now I can actually see him flapping his wings as he works his way across the screen. So then I can get a better sense of how that clip is working. But that's kind of a crappy path he's on. But because I'm using my select tool, now the path isn't selected. If the path is selected, it moves all of it. But if I don't have it selected, I can adjust its shape. So now the bird is following that shape, which is fine, but it's not that exciting of an activity because, oh look, the bird, la la la. It's an arc. It's not a crazy bird yet. I promised you a crazy bird. So let's make this into a crazy bird. So to make this bird into a crazy bird, I want to use a different kind of path. And this is something that we haven't looked at before. But this path here is completely modifiable using the direct selection tool. So I can adjust it the same way as if, so we can see, okay, there, that's what the path is, and now the bird follows that, which actually isn't a bad path, but it's not a crazy bird yet. I want this to be a crazy bird. So I'm going to make a temporary junk layer. And this is now important because if I don't have that junk layer, I'm going to try and draw with my pencil tool. And I recommend you set the pencil to smooth. It defaults to straighten. Use smooth, it gives you a better line. Now if I use the pencil tool and try and draw, it tells me I can't draw on this layer. Layer bird is a tween span which does not support drawing. I say, oh yeah, sure, okay. I'll make a junk layer here. And now I am going to, let's see, the bird will start up here. He's going to follow this line. Now that particular path that I drew with the pencil, we can see is this. We'll change its color so it really shows. I just drew that. It's a path. Now that starts to look more like a crazy path that my bird can follow. If I take that path that I drew, copy it or cut it, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to just copy it for now. Turn off that layer so we don't see it. This path that the bird's following is boring. It is. But I need to make it longer so I can do something here. If I click on that path, an option that I want here by right-clicking is not there, which is paste. I want a standard paste. It's not there. If I choose these options, apparently I didn't give it enough frames yet. Hang on. But easiest is just Command V on the keyboard. It pastes it in. And now, apparently, I don't get my whole path. It's not liking me. Let's try again. Select it. Copy it. Click. And Flash is being grumpy now. So currently now, during the second try, it worked of pasting the path in with it looping, but it's going backwards. But I can use the same trick I used at the beginning, which is reverse keyframes. And now we can see the bird follows this path. So the bird's kind of looping up and down, but it's not really doing everything I wanted to do. It's not being totally crazy. So I'm going to be working on the assumption that the bird is starting off in the distance, so I'm going to make it small. So I'm going to use the transform tool and shrink it down. And as it goes through the animation, now I will go to the ending frame, make it bigger. And now I have the scale change occurring. But I want the bird to follow this path, flying right side up, upside down, doing full loops. It's a very small, agile bird. This tween, if I don't click on the bird, but if I click on the tween, either on the stage or in the timeline, it's an option of orient to path. When I do that, we'll see that the bird is now following this path, doing loops. So when I promised you a crazy bird, I wasn't kidding. This bird is crazy. Now I just need to adjust his position a little bit. So he will end about here, and shrink the tween up a little bit. So I'm scaling the tween, not the bird. Now we can see the bird is truly, he's having some serious issues. He got into some bad bird seed, and it's having an effect on him. So I can take that bad path, make that a guide so it won't come back and haunt me. Alright, so now I have my bird flying. Whee! Flopping all over on the screen. Okay, I kind of like that. Now, all that's really left to do to wrap up my bird animation is I want to extend out the sky, the house, the ground, and tell D2L I didn't forget about it. And now I can hit F5, those extend out, so now we can see the bird flying in front of the house. Okay. And now this fade to black, I'm just going to move that over here, and let's extend. Now I need to extend out the other objects as well. And then it fades away. And our movie is now complete. So I've animated on a custom design path. I have panned across the stage. My bird is getting bigger and smaller, simply changing the scale during a tween. Fade in from black, fade out from black. And if I wanted that black to be white instead of black, I could very easily modify it in my library. So this fade box does not have to be black, but it could be white. My text could be blue. And if we run the movie, we'll see it's blue with white. Because it's a symbol, I don't have to change it on the stage. I can just change the actual symbol itself, and that affects where it occurs in the artwork.